Let's get it. We're almost there. We're almost there. Okay, so let's get into it today. So let's get this LinkedIn going. My name is Honorable, by the way. And we're about to get this thing going. We're about to get this thing jumping. I should pass some music on in the background, but you know what? It's all right. I think it'll be all right. Let's see if I can adjust the camera. You feel me? See the whole spot. My LinkedIn should be connecting in a moment. Let me make sure that we're good on that end. Oh yeah, let's go. So it's that time, everybody. So I think today is very important. Why? Because we are going to be talking about factories of the future. And there's no better time than now. All right. They said the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago, and the second best time to plant a tree is today. So a part of this video is to be very informative about somebody who I care about very closely because he's a mentor of mine. His name is Drewery. He the manufacturing guy to the T, right? So he has his own company. Name is a company called Digon. What they are, their equipment manufacturing marketplace, where they essentially allow people to buy and sell different equipment from CNC machines, laser cutters, to whatever you need to make sure that you have the manufacturing manufacturing of the future, right? So recently, he just did this TED talk, okay, at West Valley College. I haven't watched it yet at all, right? So I told him that when I watch the video, I'm gonna do a reaction video. So only about eight minutes, right? So we're about to get into it. But let me give you a little bit of context. So I'm gonna share my screen and I'm gonna show you guys his LinkedIn just really quickly, right? And then what we're gonna do is I'm gonna go through kind of each one and how we kind of met, and then we're gonna get right into it. So boom, this is who he is right here. So if you see this guy, this is Will Jury. Okay, we both worked at Astra. He hired me there. He was, I believe he's the VP of supply chain at Astra. Yep. So he went to HBS, Harvard Business School, for grad school, Carnegie Mellon undergrad. Ended up working for PwC, helping with a lot of their supply chain. Ended up going to Bright Machines, Social Construct, Astra Space, which is a rocket company. You feel me? You know what? Let's go see how Astra's doing. Let me show you. Let me show you the rockets that we were working on. All right. Let's see. Let's try to get us. Let's try to get this one. Okay, you guys can't see that just yet, but we will do a quick adjustment. Share something else. Boom.
Of the Rio Grande.
There's always ads.
And started exploring these majestic canyons.
Let's see what we got. Here we go. Here goes one of the rockets that I worked on.
LV0007 has cleared the pad and is on its way to
There you
space.
Go. For those who missed it. Future. But going back to it, I kind of want to just show you guys a little bit about who he is, and I wanted to react to this video that I have not watched just yet. So, here we are. Let's get it. Boom. All right. Let's get it. Come on.
I'm here to talk to you about manufacturing and how we are going to collectively help build the factories of the.
Boom. Opened it up. White jacket on. Came out with the J's on. You feel me? Air Force, not Air Force, sorry, Air Jordan 1s. Come on. It's already off to a good start. Swagged out. You feel me? Hey, name another CEO who's more swagged out. I'll wait. Thank you. All right. Come on. Let's get it. All right. So let's get this going. It's only eight minutes, so I'll make sure that we get everything. All right. But there we go. So the color of his company is actually blue and white. Actually very similar to my startup, but blue and white. And you feel me? He's representing. You know, like you got, if you're the top CEO, you also got to be top swag as well. You feel me? And here it goes.
The future. This is a battery cell. Most of you use this product every day without even knowing about it. This type of platform technology powers things like your consumer electronics, maybe electric vehicles, but most people never stop to think about how these batteries get made. This battery was most likely started its life in a salt flat like this.
One more thing. So He probably started with the battery cell because he worked at Tesla. So he actually opened up some of the very first factories in Fremont. So when it comes to understanding electric batteries, electric vehicles, supply chain, he's the guy. So he's probably just setting the scene. He's probably going to get into some of his Tesla experience probably in a couple of minutes, if I have to assume. But that's probably why he started that. So now we're going to talk about the supply chain on the lithium ion, I'm assuming, and then kind of just going down and kind of getting into what it is that we're talking about. So let's continue this video.
Yes, in a place like Bolivia or Chile, where the salts get mined out of the ground and made into a clay powder. Those clay powders get loaded into mixing tanks where it gets made into a slurry paste, and then that paste gets coated onto an electrode. It's a kind of like making a letter or an envelope of some sort. And after that process, those strips of the battery get wound up into what's called a jelly roll. Those jelly rolls get loaded into cans, like a Campbell's soup can, if you will. And each battery is individually inspected and scanned with X-ray technology to make sure that there are no defects, no bumps, or other impurities that will make your product not work the way you want it to. The interesting thing about this process is that so much of this happens outside of the US. It really doesn't have.
All right, there we go. So everybody knows Trump just put, what, 245% tariffs on China, right? So when it comes to manufacturing outside of the US, this is the future to which we're living in, right? Meaning that right now, all the manufacturing is happening overseas. You have Vietnam, you have China, a lot of the mainly Asian countries, right? We're about to get into it and talk about how can we manufacture here at home and figure out a way to make sure that the margins work and that also we can do good business. And he's probably about to get into that right now.
Have to be that way. The solution might seem really simple to you. Why don't we just make more of the things that we need here in the US? I'm sure we can find a factory or a company, someone here that can make it. The sad reality is that most of the factories that would be capable of making these high-tech products are now run down and shuttered.
Boom. Let's talk about it. So GM, Ford, right? If you look at what Detroit looks at, I haven't even been to Detroit, but I know people have been there. Shout out to T Grizzly. But if you look at what Detroit looks like now, you wouldn't think that that was the best place to manufacture in the world, right? So I think that he's bringing up a good point, right? Where you have a lot of these grandfather type mentality when it comes to not necessarily corporations, but corporate leaders, I would say, that essentially forget that they were the pinnacle at some point in time, right? And I think it's important because if you go to, like, say, Europe, right? And like Europe is, I know I've heard people say like Europe is kind of a relic of the past, right? You go to Paris, right? You go to Germany, you go to Italy, you go to Rome, right? And you realize that this at some point in time was the greatest place to be on earth 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago, right? Paris, Germany, right? Maybe not 1940s, but you get the point, right? These were some of the best places to be 150 years ago, 200 years ago, right? But guess what? Now, nobody really wants to go. It becomes a relic of the past, right? So I think this is very important because we don't want our manufacturing to be the same way. We don't want to outsource everything. We don't want other countries to be considered the best place to manufacture, right? So I think he's about to start getting into that. When you think about Ford, you think about GM, you think about Cadillac, you think about a lot of these American manufacturing automotive companies, right? That had jobs for people. They essentially brought industries to the United States, especially in a lot of major cities. And now a lot of these places are run down, right? They need people to come in and kind of make sure that it can be returned back to what it was, if not better.
These places that were once full of life are now a shell of their former selves. It wasn't always this way, though. This is the U.S. Steel Homestead Works factory in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, my hometown.
U.S. Steel, okay? So I believe that U.S. Steel, I think, was Vanderbilt, right? Let me do a quick search. U.S. Steel. Let's see. Maybe it's Carnegie Mellon. Let's see. Yep, it's in Pittsburgh. So that's where he's from. Founder. Okay, Andrew Carnegie, J.P. Morgan, and Charles Schwab, the big three. You feel me? Hey, the big three. So Andrew Carnegie, U.S. Steel, J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank, and Charles Schwab, also another bank, brokerage account, does all the stocks, right? There's no way that these guys would have thought that in 100 years, this is exactly how their plants will look like, right? How is this even acceptable? How can, as American people, as American corporations, how can we essentially look at our younger generation in the eyes and look at our products in the eyes and say, this is essentially what we have became, right? So let's hear him talk about his take on it, and then we're going to kind of get into it. I know I'm pausing a lot, but I'm very passionate about these type of things.
Where my grandfather and 6 of my uncles worked and started their careers. Places like this, there were the factories of the world, in fact, they helped support the defense industry during World War II and during the war efforts. They supported the automotive industry in places like Detroit, and also the aviation industry for all the planes that companies like Boeing and others make. We've been racking up a major trade deficit because we don't make so much of these things here anymore. This calculation is very simple. Exports minus imports. In the last few years, in 2024, the US actually imported $1 trillion more than it exported. I just want to make sure you heard me right. $1 trillion more than it exported.
All right, now, $1 trillion more than we exported. The best thing that America exports is culture, okay? Let's just keep it a stack. However, we have to be able to be competitive. We can't just export culture, because I can guarantee you, if an American corporation can go to somewhere else in the world and it makes their business more favorable and the margins look right, they will 100% leave, right? And that's not the way that things should work. So when it comes to this, is like, how are we even able to import $100 trillion more than we are able to export? How does that even happen, right? And like, I'm all for people going to grad school. I'm all for people, making complicated Excel sheets. Sure, that's fine, right? But how can you ignore things like this? Okay, and then this is absolutely unacceptable.
And this is one of the biggest policy issues that we have in our time, is to try to think about, how do we close this gap? There are really 2 ways to think about it. We can either import less or export more, or we could make more of the things that we need here in the US so that we don't have to rely so much on external partners to make them for us. It's interesting. This is actually one of the few issues that both Democrats and Republicans agree on, is that we need to do more of these things here at home.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's great. Setting the picture, right? Export, import is bipartisan. Regardless if you're a Democratic or Republican, the color is not red or blue, it's green, right? So if there's a way that everybody can essentially benefit from, whether it's not necessarily tariffs, but mainly focusing on manufacturing here in the States, and that essentially needs to be the conversation and the plan that's set out, instead of dividing people based off tariffs, or even just based off of if you're Democratic or Republican.
President Joe Biden, during his term, preached about building back better and building back the infrastructure that we once lost. And President Trump now touts the Make America Great Again, which is also the same effort to bring more of this manufacturing back here, so that we are not only independent in our manufacturing, but that we also are able to create living wage jobs that people can use to feed their families.
Okay, stop there. So boom. This is very important to mention. So, Will and I, we talked about this a couple of days ago when we were hanging out, right? The idea that labor jobs are not living wage jobs needs to be restructured, okay? So what he was telling me was that, and he mentioned in the videos, that his dad and some of his 6 brothers, they all worked at U.S. Steel, right? When you could graduate college, if you went to college, but if you graduated high school and you needed a job and you wanted to go do 25 to 30 years at U.S. Steel, you could still buy a house. You could still have a family. You could buy a nice car. You would not be struggling by any means. And that was what the middle class and the so-called American dream looked like, right? That is essentially really important to kind of keep in mind, because if you think about what people think of labor jobs now, they think of, oh, you're not going to be able to support your family, or labor jobs tend to be a poor man's job, right? However, 100 or so years ago, or even 80 years ago, right, that was not the case. You could graduate high school, as I said before, and go get a job at U.S. Steel, or go get a job at GM or Ford or whatever, and make what would be considered today $150,000 a year, with health insurance and with benefits, and then take a couple of vacations a year if you wanted to do that, have a family, have as many kids as you want, right? And still be able to have a high quality of life, right? Now in present day, in 2025, this is not the case. So let's hear him kind of dive into it a little bit more.
I'll start my personal story about manufacturing in the early 1900s, when my grandparents were part of a wave of migration called the Great Migration. In post-slavery...
I'm gonna pause this for you guys just to kind of take a look, right? So I'm from Oakland, California. Will's from Pittsburgh. Detroit is essentially where a lot of the manufacturing kind of happens, right? In the Midwest. And then I think that this right here is very important, right? Because the South was not producing nearly as much as far as the Industrial Revolution in terms of, let's say, I'm not going to say always California per se, but mainly the Midwest, which is why a lot of the descendants of slaves that were sharecroppers, they essentially ended up migrating to the Midwest because that's where the industry was. And they became the middle class, whether black, white, whatever, they became the middle class of that area. And he's going to kind of describe that a little bit more.
Reconstruction era, millions of African Americans moved from the Deep South to places like Pittsburgh in search of better economic opportunities. These are my grandparents. That's John and Goldie Mae Drewery.
Shout out John. You feel me? Shout out John.
They were two of these migrants during this time that moved to Pittsburgh in search of these opportunities. And thankfully, they were able to find great jobs at U.S. Steel, making these steel products, and a good enough living wage that they were able to raise a family of 20 children. If you don't believe me,
bag drop.
This is just the girls.
Oh, wow. 20 children. U.S. Steel, right? I doubt they're college educated, right? Maybe they're probably not even high school educated. 20 children, U.S. Steel, gave them opportunity, gave them a job, and they have 20 children. Think about that. I don't know anybody having 20 children in 2025 that's working at a manufacturing company or even any company for that sake.
13 girls and 7 boys. And this is lucky number 15. My dad, Will Drewery, who started his career working in the steel mills.
Shout out Will.
In Pittsburgh. My dad.
Shout out Will Sr. Will Sr., there you go.
During this time, spent a lot of his time worrying about manufacturing and how his job was taken away during this really important time of his life. And so you can understandably see why he was very reluctant when I told him I was interested in pursuing a career in manufacturing. In the last few years, there is now a new wave of innovation happening. Industries like the semiconductor industry that are supporting the data centers that underpin companies like OpenAI and Anthropic, the batteries that support the consumer electronics products and additional power storage needs for these AI use cases, and defense applications for things like cube satellites that support the defense industry are all things that need to be made here in the US.
Okay, boom, quick. Say this real quickly. So there's something called ITAR. I think it stands for like International Trade and Arms Regulations, something like that, right? And it's a concept that I think generally is pretty good, but pretty much it has to do with anything when it comes to arms or national defense or national security, right? And a lot of these things need to be done here in America. I mean, you can't, Lockheed Martin can't have a manufacturing or factory in, let's say, China, for example, right? SpaceX and a lot of these top companies, because they're considered weapons and they're considered for national security, they sometimes often cannot have foreign or international employees, right? Because you're dealing with very proprietary and confidential information, okay? That's kind of what AI is now, and that's kind of what the direction is now, right? So if you think about OpenAI, as he mentioned before, OpenAI has data centers, right? And with the data centers is where all this information and compute powers being processed constantly. And when you're typing in an AI chatbot, it's being saved somewhere, right? I don't necessarily want to get into the political argument if China is our enemy. However, they are our competitor, right? So what does that mean? Do you want your AI chatbots to be sitting in China or sitting in Russia or sitting in Iran or sitting anywhere else that is not favorable to what you believe is the American Constitution? Probably not. You feel me? So with that being said, I think this is very important because the future of dual use technology, so dual use technology is pretty much when you have military and then you have a commercial application, right? So the future of dual use technology is here and it is not going away. OpenAI constantly does deals with the government, right? You see Doge with Elon Musk. They're constantly just kind of, the church and the state is completely intertwined now, right? The private sector and the public sector is intertwined. Lockheed Martin, right? General Dynamics, Raytheon, Boeing, these top companies. Now a company called Anduril, right? They essentially are doing deals with the government, and I doubt that you want your manufacturing to be in China, right? So I'm assuming he's probably going to set the scene and say, well, we're doing all this dual use technology for the military application, right? And also for the commercial application, right? That means that we have to we have to manufacture here in the States, because if we don't, then we'll be not only breaking a lot of regulations, but we're actually putting our national security at risk as well by simply just giving over things like IP or giving data to some of our competitors. I'm not going to say enemies, but our competitors.
Strategic reasons and for national security reasons, we need more places where we can make these things. And there's good news. The good news is you're going to help us do it. We all need to really think about how we are going to support this industry in a few ways. I'll name 3 of them, 3 at the top of my list at least. We can start by investing in infrastructure. The factory infrastructure that underpins this entire industry is one of the most important things that we need to enable ourselves to be able to make these things. Batteries and semiconductors aren't things that can just be assembled by hand. You actually need state-of-the-art technology, and you need to make real investments in that technology in order to make cutting-edge products like the ones that I just showed you.
Boom, that's important, number 1, right? So at the core of every single phone, computer, any device you have, there's chips, there's semiconductors. And as an electrical engineer, I hated semiconductors class, by the way, sidebar. However, I had a good professor, so I passed. But anyways, it's important to realize that, like, when you want to build technology, you have to have these essential components a part of whatever it is that you're building. And if we as Americans, or as we as Americans don't have that infrastructure provided for us, then we're relied to outsource. Then that means that the borrower is always slave to the borrower is slave to the lender. The borrower is slave to the lender. Same thing when it comes to manufacturing. If we keep outsourcing all of our operations for the things that we need most, for example, right? In 2021, there was a chip shortage. Every tech company that was doing any kind of hiring, they couldn't even get new computers. People that wanted to buy cars, they couldn't buy new cars just because of the chip shortage, and that essentially affected everything. Okay, so I do believe, I agree here. Where it's like there are certain things that we should outsource. I think, right, when it comes to, let's say, pillowcases, right, covers, blankets. Sure, you can outsource that a little bit, but when it comes to the core products and the core mission of what a country needs to be successful, it is very difficult to outsource 70% of it, 50% of it, right? It is very difficult to do these things. So ideally, the very first thing he mentioned was to invest in critical infrastructure, but more particularly manufacturing of the future.
It's going to rely on technology. This is my company, Diagon.
This is company. So everybody can go to Diagon AI, Diagon.ai, and I think it's very important because what he does is he takes all this manufacturing equipment, right, that's either pre-existing or pre-existing, or I guess I could be built, but pre-existing, right? And he essentially tags it, and he essentially posts it on the marketplace and allows people to sell it and to buy it, so that what? So that people have an easier time to be able to manufacture and to be able to launch products at scale without having to do whatever they were doing before. And I can guarantee you, the way to source manufacturing equipment is horrible. The system doesn't always exist, it didn't exist just yet, and now this is how he's solving the problem.
We're just one of many examples of companies that are building in this space to support the manufacturing industry. We've built a marketplace that helps companies find surplus and overstock assets that are available from big manufacturers.
Assets, boom.
So that companies...
All right, see, he's dropping jewels here, and you guys don't even know it. Or maybe some of you guys do, you feel me? But you guys don't even know it. Assets. Manufacturing is an asset class. If you have high-level CNC machine equipment, laser cutters, 3D printers, welding machines, these are assets, right? And sometimes, and for so long in America, we're not looking at manufacturing as being an asset class, right? We need to be able to produce, okay? And this is a great example, and this is showing you that these manufacturing equipments that he has listed on, you know what? Let's just go to it, right? Let's just go to it, so I can show you guys exactly what it is that I'm talking about. Okay, we're gonna just go to it real quick. Took a quick little sidebar. I need some music for you guys, huh? Boom. So before we get back there, I'm gonna just share my screen really quickly and show you guys exactly what I'm talking about. So boom, this is website, okay? Nice website, right? And he's focusing on batteries right now, but obviously he's doing a lot of different stuff. So if you just go to the browser products, right, you see these millions of dollars worth of equipment on his software, right? You choose. So let's say this one right here, or let's say the mixing system, right? This is something that is sitting in a factory in probably Korea. Yeah, sitting in a factory in Korea, right? I knew it was Korea because we talked about this a while ago, but sitting in a factory in Korea that is worth $3.4 million, so almost $3.5 million, not even including shipping. Okay, sitting in a factory rotting away. Not sure what the output is. Okay, here it goes, right? So here goes, yeah, here it goes. So it's a 110 kilowatt. Yeah, so I'm not sure exactly what the output is as far as mixing and everything, because again, I'm not into manufacturing to that level. But why is this just sitting somewhere not being utilized when we could essentially figure out an American company to purchase it, ship it, and help build our manufacturing plants, right? And not only for that, not only build a manufacturing plants, right, but also make it an asset class. This is why it's important, right? Because you have all this equipment that's just sitting somewhere that it can help systems become better over time, right? So you have things like robotic arms, right? This is $70,000 right here, right? That can help you become more efficient in your manufacturing systems, okay? So I just want to show you guys that just really quickly to kind of, you know, paint the picture for what his website looks like. And I'll make sure, you know what, I'll even just drop his website in the chat and you guys can explore it and you guys can, you know, figure out what it is that he really does at a deeper level. And boom, let's get back to it. Boom, pick up where we left off.
Can do them at a fraction of the cost and very short lead times. And third, it's going to rely on people. It's going to rely on a workforce of people who are willing and interested in getting into this industry. It's going to require.
One thing that I liked about working in the construction business is they said the construction business is a people business, and I couldn't agree more, right? Like I said, his dad and his grandfather both worked in manufacturing. He works in manufacturing now, right? And you just see how the generations have been able to benefit from labor, from laborers' jobs, right? But more particularly, being a part of something that is important and a part of critical infrastructure, and that's something that is not talked about enough, right? So when it comes to this, I think that sometimes we often forget, like, okay, yes, right? We want to build factories in America, okay? Okay, but that's great. But don't set up a factory in a town with a population of 600 people, right? How about you set up a factory in a place where it has, you know, 150,000 people, and I have a, let's say, a large population between the ages of 16 years old and 35, right? And you pay them livable wages, right? This is the labor that we're talking about that can be very beneficial to the backbone of what American manufacturing could look like. And I think, and I hope that he kind of goes into that a little bit more.
Require us to really think about what it means to pay living wages for people to work.
I haven't watched this yet, right? I have not watched this video at all yet, and I haven't seen anything yet. But I'm just telling you that this is important, right? And again, he just said it: livable wages. All right, that's what we need to start doing
in these industries. And this is not just going to rely on the people that are working in these factories. These people with hard hats are really just one fraction of the people that need to support it. When I think back to my interest in getting into the manufacturing industry, a lot of my relatives were not so happy about that idea and weren't very encouraging of it. All of you probably know people in your lives, maybe young people, hopefully young people, that are interested in pursuing careers, building things that are physical and tangible that we are.
Did I just say that? Okay, boom. This is a go-to-market. This is a challenge for you guys, anybody watching. I need everybody to come up with 10 cities, 10 cities that has the largest in America, 10 cities that's the largest population between 18 and 35 years old, and figure out if they can go set up a manufacturing plant nearby. Boom, go. All right? That's what we need to start doing, okay? Young people need these jobs. Now, listen, I always hear, people don't want to work these jobs. Okay, are you going to pay them? Most people will do any job if you pay them livable wages. Will they be able to go for vacations a couple times a year? Will that 19-year-old who just graduated high school, right, be able to get a car, get a nice Ford, you feel me, a box Chevy, depending on where you're from, GNX, depending on where you're from, get a nice car, right, and then be able to work at a manufacturing plant, have a family, settle down by 28, and be able to live their life. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but will they be able to have that opportunity? Right now, it doesn't exist, okay? But we need to be able to start thinking about the future of manufacturing, because the future of manufacturing, quite literally, is directly related to the future of the world and the future of America and the future of labor, the future of our younger generation. And I'm a part of that younger generation. I'm 24 years old. You feel me? So I think this stuff is very, very important.
Y'all can rely on. And I think it's going to be up to all of us to change the perspective and to change the narrative about what it means to make these products.
All right, so I know we have about 12 seconds left, but before we get going, right? America was built on slavery. Okay, stick with me for a second. Okay, I think that we've just been preconditioned in our minds to believe that labor is equal to lower class, and that's not always the case. Okay, labor does not have to be equal to lower class, and it shows you that during Reconstruction, right, during what Jim Crow, during the Great Migration, during up until recently, 1980s, labor was not always looked at as as being lower class. Okay, we need to make sure that labor essentially is not looked at as being middle class and is going to have to do with a big propaganda machine that we may just have to do or have to contribute to. But labor jobs and allowing your family to eat is not labor, is not lower class, or is not looked at as being poor. Okay, so once we kind of can get over that and say, you know what, I could be 18 years old, just graduating high school, and go get a labor job and go work for a top manufacturer. That should be okay, and that should be an option. Okay, you shouldn't have to go, work your ass off. You feel me? And then be getting paid $11.35 an hour. No, that's not how we live life. Okay, that's not how you can do that. However, there's an opportunity here, and I believe that he's the right person to solve it, and we all
I
are.
hope you all join me in this journey. I want to thank you in advance. It's been a pleasure. All right.
Boom. So, I want to know you guys' thoughts. Thank you guys for listening. There's going to be more reaction videos coming soon, but I think this was a good one. I'm glad I was able to watch this. You feel me? I'm probably going to watch it again and kind of do a lot more recap, but please, we need to be able to equip manufacturing facilities of the future, right? And what are those three things that we mentioned, right? Number one, investment, okay? Maybe two, actually. Number one is investment, okay? Number two, I forgot. But number one is investment. Let's just say two. Number one is investment, and number two is labor. Okay? Thank you guys. Peace. I appreciate you guys for listening, and I appreciate you guys for watching. I'll see you guys at the next one. We're going to be doing these more, probably around this time, around 9 o'clock. And it's going to go all over all social media platforms as well. But thank you guys, and I hope you guys have a good Thursday evening, April 17th. Let's get it.